How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weatherspot 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on Invest 98L, which likely will become Hurricane Hermine in the very near future, and will determine if potential Hurricane Hermine has a possibility of impacting the United States, potentially as a major hurricane. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related causes. So let's begin by taking a look at the water vapor imagery for Invest 98L. And by the way, we'll also talk about newly formed tropical storm Gaston as well as Hurricane Fiona. But right now, taking a look at Invest 98L, we do see that there isn't really an organized area where there's a lot of thunder shower activity. You see that the thunder shower activity is very scattered at this time, and there is a little bit of stronger upper level winds over this storm at this disturbance at this point, where we do see an upper level high that's located right around the Dominican Republic, right in between Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico at this time. And we could tell that there's a little bit of stronger wind shear just to the west of this tropical disturbance, where we're seeing the clouds drift towards the west. However, this wind shear won't necessarily be enough to disorganize this storm, as it's very likely we're going to see tropical storm Hermine within the next 48 hours, and pretty much inevitable that we'll see it within the next 5 days, as in fact the upper level winds associated with this upper level high will only help this storm move faster towards the west, which would allow for a little bit more winds, which would allow the wind on the northern side of the storm to be a little bit stronger, because upper level winds and the lower level winds will be moving the same direction, which would help actually enhance the storm's wind speed as it heads further westward. So we're likely to see a tropical storm as a result of that, and we don't see a lot of stable air in training this storm either, so it's very likely we're going to see tropical storm Hermine in the very near future. Now, taking a look at the current current wind shear map, and we do see that there's an upper level high I was talking to you guys about, where it's bringing stronger upper level winds coming from the north at this time. However, there is that small pocket where this invest is located, where it's going to be able to develop into a tropical storm eventually, and the wind shear should begin to lighten down as this continues to head further westward, once this upper level high moves towards a position where the upper level winds won't be much of a factor for this invest as it heads further westward, which is definitely a concern, because that will lead to the potential of rapid intensification as soon as this hits the Western Caribbean. And taking a look at the chance of tropical cyclone formation, a 90% chance, so we're almost guaranteed at this point we're going to see tropical storm Hermine, and I'd say we're more likely than not going to see Hurricane Hermine, as it seems like all signs are pointing towards the Western Caribbean to have a large area where there isn't a lot of wind shear and there isn't a high amount of stable air in the Caribbean at this time. So we're likely to see the storm have an open area to where it'll strengthen into a hurricane, which is definitely very concerning news. And we also have newly formed tropical storm Gaston, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. Now, take a look at what the GFS model is stating, which if this scenario were to be correct, it'll be extremely concerning, because if I were to continue to move forward, we see that the GFS model does strengthen a tropical storm relatively early. We do see a well-defined center of circulation at this time by the time we approach right around the Friday to Saturday time frame, where it's just to the north of Venezuela and just to the south of Dominican Republic. However, we do see that it doesn't really strengthen much, at least over the next 3 days, because like I said, there's going to be a moderate to light amount of wind shear over this storm, which should at least keep the strengthening speed at bay. So it should So it shouldn't strengthen much over the next 3 days as a result of the moderate wind shear it's going to experience early on. But we do see that the GFS model quickly wants to strengthen this, and it undergoes almost bombogenesis cycle, where this storm pressure just drops tremendously from maybe being a category 1 caliber storm to potentially a category 4 in our hands, just to the south of Cuba, which would definitely be a major concern. And this is going 7 days out, so there's still a lot of time to iron out the forecast. But when the European model is also agreeing with the strength forecasts compared to what the GFS model is saying, as well as the general area of where this storm would go. It definitely raises the concern that the certainty is a lot higher, because two of the most reliable computer models are nearly in exact agreement with each other when it comes to the strength and the projected path of the storm, which definitely does raise the certainty, which is why I say more likely than not we're going to see Hurricane Hermine. It does, of course, there's still time to iron out the forecasts. Although both of the two main computer models are suggesting heavily that we're going to see a major hurricane in our hands by next week, just to the south of Cuba, there's still time for the computer models to iron out their forecast. But based on what we're seeing right now, it certainly is not looking good, and this could potentially be a worst case scenario if this forecast holds up, where we do see the storm strengthen even more as it approaches the United States. Of course, it becomes a lot more uncertain past the 7-day mark, so there's still a lot of time to iron out the strength and the track forecast as this approaches the United States. So I definitely wouldn't start panicking right now for the Southeast and Florida, but it's definitely something you need to be aware of, because there's certainly a possibility that a major hurricane could be right at your doorstep by next week, especially with two of the main computer models heavily leaning towards that scenario, where we see the GFS model want to drop this storm down to 929 millibars. That's equivalent to a Category 5 hurricane right in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, right along the Gulf Coast of the United States doorstep, which is certainly concerning. And if we were to take a look at the forecasted wind shear over the next several days, like I said, there's going to be an upper level high located right over Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, which should bring stronger upper level winds right around the Caribbean as this heads for eastward, which is why the strengthening will be slow for the most part for the near future. However, beyond the 4 to 5 day mark, that's when the computer models do expect the wind shear to completely lighten down as this upper level high moves directly over this tropical storm or hurricane Hermine, which would allow a little bit more divergence to occur for this storm to strengthen more. And we do see the wind shear as it heads further northward will be non-existent based on the GFS's model scenario, and the European model is forecasting the same thing, and it doesn't look much better when we're taking a look at the relative humidity over the next several days, where we do see there's not going to be much dry air that would entrain the center of circulation for the dry air to completely disrupt its strengthening and its rapid intensification, which does raise a major concern. Now, there's still a possibility that maybe the computer models have a misunderstanding where exactly the upper level high will be located, or how much dry air will actually be in the Gulf of Mexico by the time we approach next week, because of course we're going to see a big trough move through the United States, which will bring more stable air to the Gulf of Mexico. That potentially could potentially slow down the strengthening process, which would definitely be much needed. But at this point, it seems like both the computer models are taking a worst case scenario. So pretty much for the Caribbean, I'd say pay close attention to this. I wouldn't start panicking just yet, but you certainly need to at least be aware of Invest 98L, which is likely to become Hurricane Hermine and potentially a major hurricane in the more long-term future, because when we have two of the main computer models agreeing that we're going to see a major hurricane with both scenarios forecasting the storms to be nearly at the exact same strength at nearly the exact same time and place, that definitely does raise a certainty with the forecast that we could see that there might be a higher possibility that this impacts the United States. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding any shifts in the forecast or any major changes in the forecast. But as of right now, you just need to be aware and that the signs aren't looking good for you guys throughout Jamaica, Cuba, and of course the United States. So just make sure to pay close attention to that. In terms of the steering currents, the main steering current will be this Bermuda Azores high, which will steer it to the west. And when it takes that northern turn will really all depend on how fast this trough moves into the United States, and of course how far south this dip in the jet stream will be, because that will create a weakness in ridging for this to turn northward. And it also sort of depends on the trajectory of Hurricane Fiona, because if Hurricane Fiona moves a little bit slower, then we're more likely to see a little bit more chopping for this to move northward a little bit earlier, to where maybe the eastern coasts of Florida and Cuba and Jamaica will get more involved. However, if there's a little bit more ridging than expected and we don't see as much of a as significant of a jet stream dip, then this will move further westward. Still time to iron out the trajectory forecast, but I'll make sure to keep you guys updated over the next several days. Now, taking a look at what the ensemble members are stating, and we do see that there are key differences between what the GFS ensemble members are saying and what the European model ensemble members are saying. The European ensemble members are leaning towards a track further westward, while the GFS ensemble members are leaning towards a track further eastward. And this would certainly be a best case scenario if this doesn't impact the United States at all and just moves to the east of the entirety of the United States. However, I'd say the more likely scenario is more in line with the European model, based on what the main GFS model and the main European model is stating when it comes to the track forecast, where it wants to take this further westward, potentially closer to the Gulf of Mexico rather than the Atlantic Ocean. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding any updates, and we do of course see that both of the ensemble members, all the ensemble members are pretty much agreeing that this will strengthen to near or around hurricane status, especially later on in the future. So I'd say the certainty that this will develop into a hurricane is high at this time. So that's something to pay close attention to. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding any shifts we see potentially with the ensemble members or the main computer models to really determine where exactly this will go. So now taking a look at my track forecasts and my strength forecast when it comes to potential Hurricane Hermine. I do expect this to strengthen into a tropical storm by tomorrow at around 40 miles per hour, and I expect a slow strengthening process over the next several days head into this weekend, where on Saturday I expect this to be around a 60 mile per hour tropical storm, but I expect rapid intensification, I'd say Sunday and beyond, where potentially by Monday we could see close to, if not over, category 2 status hurricane in just right at Cuba's doorstep. So that's something to pay close attention to. And beyond that, there is that possibility of a major hurricane. So we're gonna need to wait and see if the computer models maintain that forecast. But with both, but it seems like it's definitely not looking good at this time. But there's still a chance that the forecast could change. I want to emphasize that. But with both of the main computer models taking nearly the exact same strength and path, it definitely is very concerning. But I'll keep you guys updated if there's any changes in the forecast. Now, take a look at the other tropical disturbances we're keeping an eye on. Of course, Tropical Storm Gaston has just formed, which has maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour, millibar pressure at around 1,009 millibars, and it's moving northeast at 17 miles per hour. The good news is that this won't really impact any land, bring any direct impacts to land, so it shouldn't be much of a worry for much of anyone in the near future, which is certainly good news. And here's Hurricane Fiona, which now has strengthened into a major hurricane at 125 miles per hour, and it's likely will become a category 4 as it continues to move northeastward. Bermuda needs to pay close attention, and of course Newfoundland, Canada, needs to pay close attention, because you potentially could see direct impacts associated with major Hurricane Fiona. And of course, along the east coast of the United States, just pay attention to high waves and a high rip current risk. And if you're under a high rip current risk, just make sure to stay if you're in an area where there's a high rip current risk, just make sure to stay out the water, because of course the water, you don't want to mess around with the ocean when there's a high rip current risk. So make sure to just stay out the water, because it could easily save your life. And taking a look at this disturbance that now has a moderate chance of developing just off the African coast. However, if it does form, it seems unlikely it's going to bring any direct impacts to land, which is also very good news. So we're just going to need to pay close attention to Invest 98L over the next several days, because that could potentially bring major impacts somewhere around the Caribbean and potentially the United States in the future. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more about the content. I hope you guys have a great day.